Wonderful. Thank you so much, Amy. And good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. I am so delighted to be here with all of you and also to welcome you to this virtual space for our event, live from Vienna, U.S. civil society at the first meeting of states parties to the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, which of course is happening right now. It's so incredibly exciting. I am Emma, and I'm currently working with the Nuclear Ban Treaty Collaborative, which aims to do exactly as the name implies, which is to facilitate collaboration among groups and individuals who want to use this treaty to achieve the abolition of nuclear weapons. And so as I'm sure you know, if you're here, currently all of the states that have ratified the treaty are gathered in Vienna for the first time ever today, tomorrow, and Thursday. And there are several states that have yet to sign and ratify the treaty that are also there as observers. And as you may have heard, there's some very exciting news just yesterday. So hours before the first meeting of states parties began, 3 new states ratified the treaty, and that was Cabo Verde, Cape Verde, Grenada, and Timor-Leste. So that brings the number up to 65 now, which is about 1/3 of the states in the world. And so that is incredible, right? 1/3 of the world has signed and ratified this treaty, and counting. So like many people, probably most people on this Zoom, I am not in Vienna at the moment. I live in the US, but this event is our way of teleporting to Vienna to get a live and direct window into what's happening at the first meeting of states parties, and also a way for us to participate, in this incredibly historic moment, even from thousands of miles away, because ultimately the truth is that each of us has a really vital role, truly a crucial role in putting the treaty to use in order to achieve the abolition of the nuclear weapons. So in Vienna, it's currently about 7 p.m., which means, of course, that the first day of the 1 MSP has wrapped up. And today or tonight, depending on where you are, we're going to hear from 4 incredible individuals who are there in Vienna, each of whom brings a unique and very important perspective to this movement. And in a moment, we're going to hear each of them just briefly introduce themselves so you know what's coming. And towards the end of the program, the last thing we're really going to do is have one big dedicated question and answer time. So throughout the hour, any questions that you have, please go ahead and put them in the chat, because we're going to be collecting them. If you have just a general question or you have a question for a particular person, put them in the chat at any time. We'll collect them and address as many as possible during the Q&A. So without further ado, I will hand the mic over to the speakers to just introduce themselves. And maybe John and Marion, since you're together on the same screen, would you like to start?
Thank you, Emma. For sure, we'll start. I'm John LaForge. I work with Nuke Watch this year for 30 years, and that's in Wisconsin. We focus on the downside of nuclear power and weapons, and have studied the land-based nuclear weapons, in particular, writing 2 books on the ICBMs. And we're happy to be here representing Nuke Watch and the collaborative, and taking lots of notes during the meetings.
I'm Marion Küpker from Germany, work here as a staff for Fellowship of Reconciliation Germany on the topic of nuclear weapons. I'm also the international coordinator of DFGVK, which is an organization connected to War Resistor League. And I'm also involved in the German-wide campaign to get rid of the US nuclear weapons. And this campaign consists of this network of 77 organizations and peace groups. So, and yeah, they sent me here also as a spokesperson for them.
Wonderful, thank you so much. And now why don't we hear from Benetick? Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. Benetick Maddison. I'm the Assistant Director and Project Specialist for Youth, Climate and Nuclear Issues at the Marshallese Educational Initiative. My job is to basically raise awareness about the impact of nuclear and climate change on the Marshall Islands. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Benetick. And we have one more speaker, Janene. Are you able to introduce yourself now, or we can give you some more time? Maybe later. Not a problem. There's a lot going on in Vienna, and so our speakers are all rushing to make time to be here with us as well. So in that case, I'm actually going to turn it back to John to give us a bit of an introduction into what's happening there in the context before we hear from each of our speakers. So take it away, John.
Great, thanks, Emma. Before I start, I really want to thank the members of the Ban Treaty Collaborative that made the Zoom webinar possible, the analysis, strategy, and the technical planning for this webinar, especially in particular Kelly Lundeen, Sophia Rose Woolman, Emma Pike, and Amy O'Brien, who have worked together to make it possible and to make sure it's going to run smoothly today. I also want to thank our speakers, Benetick Maddison from the Marshall Islands, Janene Yazzie from the Navajo Nation, Marion Küpker here from Hamburg, Germany, for joining us today after a string of 4 long working days in Vienna. Thanks also to Ralph Hutchison from the Oak Ridge Environmental Peace Alliance and the Collaborative for the financial support in getting us over here to Vienna. Just in a quick overview, there are over 600 disarmament activists, civil society activists, campaign organizers, and parliamentarians who have convened here in Vienna to discuss how to strengthen and expand the 2017 Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. The positive goodwill and the electric energy of the gathering is fueled by this freedom we have all embraced, freedom from the oppressive, tyrannical, mythological belief in deterrence theory, which has been fiercely imposed on us for decades by the nuclear weapon states. And the people in these rooms and around the world participating remotely are happily freed of this oppression these several days. The 2-day ICANN forum, which ran Saturday and Sunday, the 1-day conference on the human impacts of nuclear detonations, and now 3 days of states parties meetings are partly celebration and part working sessions. In the words of Beatrice Finn, who's the executive director of the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons and winner of the Nobel Peace Prize for their efforts in establishing the treaty, we are working together to save the world. That's how she put it in her welcoming remarks. The function of the hearings and the meetings this week is to establish a blueprint for the end of nuclear weapons. And this week's meetings are focused on doing exactly that, laying out how to implement the articles of the treaty. And we've been fortunate to be able to participate in the early sessions in today's first states party meetings, and looking forward to reporting on the details later. So thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much, John, for that, that introduction. And before we get into hearing more deeply from our speakers, actually, I want to give Janene a moment. If you're connected, if you can hear us, Janene, would you like to briefly introduce yourself? If not, we'll hear from you later, so no problem. Okay, no problem. I think maybe maybe you can hear, so not a problem. In that case, we are going to go ahead and hear from our first speaker, who is Benetick Kabua Maddison. Benetick is a project specialist for youth, climate, and nuclear issues at the Marshallese Educational Initiative, which is a nonprofit organization that serves the Marshallese community, raises awareness of Marshallese culture, and facilitates intercultural dialogue to foster positive social change. Take it away, Benetick.
Thank you, Emma. And I'd also like to thank Sophia for reaching out and inviting me to participate in today's Zoom call. I was planning on preparing like a statement or something, but I've been busy with meetings and interviews one after the other. But it's good to be here today. This is my first time outside of the United States, my first time in Europe. And to be here representing my community, representing my culture, really is an honor. As you all know, the Marshall Islands was used as a nuclear testing ground from 1946 to 1958 by the United States, where they detonated 67 large-scale nuclear weapons, which is equivalent to 7,200 Hiroshima bombs. And so being here today and sharing our history, sharing our stories with people here in Vienna, really it helps in our cause for the fight to achieve nuclear justice. We are still experiencing ongoing nuclear problems in terms of health, environment, and cultural consequences that stem from the nuclear testing program in the Marshall Islands. I had the opportunity to participate in today's side event, which was hosted by Kiribati and the Kazakhstan. And I was able to convey the message of, working together, especially communities or populations or peoples who are affected by nuclear testing, as well as nuclear development production. As I mentioned earlier, we are under this compact of free association with the United States. And this compact, it allows us Marshallese to migrate to the US without a visa, for us to be able to find jobs, to attend school, for health and other purposes that attracts Marshallese to the United States. And the problem with the compact of free association, as sometimes I'd like to label it as an imperialist policy, given that it doesn't address the nuclear issues that my people and I are facing. We are still having to ask for adequate reparations. And now that the United States is now at the table with the Marshall Islands, in fact, a few days ago, they started in-person negotiations, compact negotiations. And so we're hoping that the next compact of free association will address many of these issues that stem from the nuclear legacy. And then speaking of the compact, as you all are probably aware, the Marshall Islands has yet to sign or support the TPNW. They're in a very complicated situation, given that the United States has a US military base in the Marshall Islands. And, they're they're being pressured, as I'm sure you're probably aware, not to support the TPNW. But based on conversations that I've had with the delegate here who's representing the Marshall Islands, he's hopeful that sometime down the road, the Marshall Islands will be able to support the TPNW. I think right now they're just trying to be strategic in terms of the Compact of Free Association negotiations that are happening. But just sitting and listening to the speakers today, states, as well as those from affected communities, populations, or peoples, I think the biggest message was that, we need assistance now. We need assistance now, to address many of these issues that nuclear affected peoples are facing. And I think the biggest thing is on health. People are having to deal with all of these health issues that they don't have the financial means to address. And so I think moving forward, as a Marshallese, it's important that despite the fact that the Marshall Islands has not ratified or supported the TPNW, it's important that the TPNW is supported by all nations, and that they create an international trust fund to help support nuclear affected people now. And in my role, not just with MEI, but also with the Reverse the Trend, a youth group that helps amplify the voices of affected communities and populations, and raising awareness about these nuclear issues. We have a side event that's coming up in 2 days, specifically for Pacific countries. We are still trying to get Pacific countries to support the TPNW, and I think this will be an opportunity on Thursday to sit with these representatives from the Pacific nations, and just kind of encourage them or motivate them to encourage their own governments to support the TPNW. But I think that is all I have to share today. Thank you.
Benetick, thank you so much. Thank you for taking your time, firstly, to be here with us. And also, if you have any information about the side event for the Pacific Youth, please do put it in the chat, because personally, I would really, really love to attend, and I'm sure many others would too, but really, thank you so much. Yes. And, actually, before we move on to our next speaker, there was an announcement that I realized I had forgotten to make. You probably have already gotten a notification on your screen about this, but this meeting is being recorded, and I wanted to make sure that everybody who's here is just aware of that. And so, yes, it will be recorded, and is being currently. Yes, so I would like to now move on to our next speaker, who is Marion Küpker. She is the spokeswoman for the Buka is Everywhere Nuclear Weapons Free Now campaign. She's also a peace officer on nuclear weapons at the Fellowship of Reconciliation Germany and international coordinator in the DFG-VK Against Nuclear Weapons. Marion currently has an appeal pending in the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg, France, stemming from a conviction in Germany for civil resistance at the Bucha nuclear weapons base. Please take it away, Marion.
Yes, thank you, Emma. Yeah, I'd like to tell you first a little bit about our German background, why we are going to Vienna, actually. So it has to do with that we have US nuclear weapons in Germany on a German base, and these nuclear weapons are just getting modernized, but it's actually also a nuclear uprising. So we get the new bombs soon, the B-6112, which are being produced in the US, and also new US fighters. So our government decided to buy 35 F-35 fighting jets, and they are only there for our new nuclear weapons here then to be part of NATO with this. And because of that, we have a German-wide network with these 77 organizations and fighting for it that this modernization stops, and also that our government signs a TPNW. And together with ICANN, we pressured very hard our new government, which got elected last autumn, and we did our lobby work also so great that right now we are on #1 worldwide with the ICANN city appeal, because we have more than 700 cities in Germany who signed, where the Mayors for Peace signed it. And even with the Mayors for Peace, we have 800 Mayors for Peace, and we are on place 3 with that. Japan is on #1, and Iran, which was very surprising for us, is #2. And also we have an ICANN parliamentarian appeal. We have 664 parliamentarians who signed that they want our government to sign the TPNW, which is, yeah, this is 60% of all our parliamentarians, but as you can imagine, mostly from the Green and the left. And because of this successful work we were doing together with civil disobedience as well and trials, we managed our government to write in the coalition treaty, this new ample coalition where also the Greens are in, that they're gonna send an observer to Vienna for the TPNW First State Conference, which was the first NATO country going, yeah, openly saying that they plan on going to Vienna. And we are very happy that up to now, we realized that also because of the pressure in the Netherlands is being in Vienna as a NATO country for observation, and another one is Belgium. And both of them are actually also having the nuclear sharing in their countries. So that's very important. And as a fourth country with an observer status is Norway. Norway also got pressured a lot since in Norway the Peace Prize took place for ICANN in 2017. And so the government had to agree to send somebody. There's some more, but maybe John talks about it later. So for me, being here, it was, I'm still here and still in the middle of it, but it's very overwhelming what's going on here. And I'm, yeah, surprised how structured it is. For example, the ICANN forum on June 18th and 19th, this was a start. So that is, and was a great possibility for NGOs and activists to learn about the ICANN network and all the different topics so especially for newcomers. Yeah, and also to update again and again our strategies. And we had here 40 internationally organized workshops, which you could see very well in the beginning, with over 100 speakers. And this has been taken live streams from, which I really, hope you're gonna use this, and because they are recorded as well and they stay online, that you use the chance to watch quite some of them. And what I realized is by being here, how, I mean, we haven't seen each other all since now 2 years or even longer because of COVID. And yeah, we have seen each other in webinars, but it's such a difference to be actually present, to talk to each other in between, in the breaks and private. It just shows how important it is that we physically are coming together and again and again. And also, for example, international NGOs have the possibilities additionally to see each other in side events or for dinners, like for example, WILF, Women International League for Peace and Freedom, was doing it. So yeah, I'm very thankful for everybody who comes here for supporting this and for supporting the parliamentarians from the states who are here and who have signed the treaty, because it takes some courage, and it would be terrible to sit here just and not having any support. So the second ICANN conference, which was on the 20th of June on the humanitarian impact of nuclear weapons, that included state representatives, and we had excellent testimonies by atomic survivors, and this was followed by great scientific talks about the danger of nuclear weapons, and also how it interacts with the climate. These were new study we got presented, and also this can be seen still online. And the question about the so-called need for nuclear deterrence was explained, debunked and rejected actually, or like the New Zealand presenter, he said, nuclear weapons are never the answer, but our treaty can be. A great preparation day for parliamentarians for the following 2.5 days, or now it's 1.5 day left, is going to take place during the state conference, which is taking place now. Actually, we were hoping from Germany to listen today to the presenters from the observer countries. But it took so long, all the other testimonies so far from other countries, that we probably gonna hear them tomorrow. So I know I can definitely say there is a German delegation here. His name, who's leading this from the Foreign Office, is Rüdiger Bohn. And we're gonna hear tomorrow what they have to say about it. But all these, I don't know whether I said it in the beginning, we have 5 delegations here. Half of them are from young people from Germany, and there's a lot of communication going on. And at least in person, we were told already that Germany has the position that in the nearby future that Germany will not be able to join the TPNW because they are part of NATO. But they are thinking about supporting the funding of, they are saying, nuclear testing victims. But we inform after that more about what's going on. And I think my time is over, so I stop here.
That's so wonderful. Thank you so much, Marion. Thank you for giving us such a great window into really being there. I actually felt like I had attended some of some of the events, and also for bringing your perspective from Germany. And also, I'm so heartened to see that Germany is there attending as an observer. And I hope that the US will follow suit one day. Yes, so thank you, Marion. And we're going to keep the screen exactly as it is, because I'm going to now pass it to John LaForge, who is the co-director of Nuke Watch, a nuclear watchdog group in Wisconsin, and he edits its quarterly newsletter. He is the co-editor with Ariane Peterson of Nuclear Heartland Revised, a guide to the 450 land-based missiles of the United States. An advocate of nonviolent direct action. He's a regular contributor to Counterpunch and Peace Voice, where he writes on nuclear weapons, nuclear power, militarism, and nonviolent resistance. Take it away, John.
Thanks, Emma. As Marion said, it's really thrilling to be here, and we keep hearing over and over again these states, parties, representatives repeating almost the same thing, that it's impossible to overstate the importance of the entry into force of the TPNW. The first treaty ever to mandate assistance and reparations to the victims and survivors of the testing done by nuclear weapons states, attacks really with nuclear weapons, experimental detonations on the people of the global South. These people are, of course, suffering a tangle of medical, social, and economic effects that have plagued the victims and the survivors in Kazakhstan, Republic of Marshall Islands, the Nevada test site, Algeria, and elsewhere. Articles 6 and 7 of the new treaty directly address the question of reparations and support in medical care for the survivors of these bomb tests. And over again, representatives have spoken out about how to enforce and strengthen Articles 6 and 7. And in fact, there are several testimonies, or we say testimonials, today and yesterday from people who have actually experienced these effects. 3 people in particular today testified about severe health and deformities that they suffered themselves after being born in these contaminated zones. Another point that I like to see reinforced here day after day is that it's some particular problem with the treaty that has been mentioned earlier, which is its allowance or acceptance of the spread of civilian nuclear power for so-called peaceful purposes. And in several cases, we've heard presenters criticize the inclusion of this allowance in the treaty. In particular, and especially Linda Pence-Gunter was particularly good during the ICANN forum. I'd like to share directly some of what she shared in her section. And one thing I learned actually in private with Linda and her husband Paul was that the inclusion of this acceptance of nuclear power was partly a question of equity, so-called equity, by countries in the global South who were saying to the North, why should we be denied a power source that countries in the North have been taking advantage of for decades? And at the same time, Paul and Linda and I were trying to imagine why developing countries in the global South would choose to take on this poison power system with all its obvious detrimental side effects, emissions during operation, contamination during accidents, and the long-term production of long-term high-level radioactive waste, which has no place to be disposed of or even abandoned in the proper way. Another point being made by several of the experts was that new weapons being developed in the industrialized countries threatened to destabilize the state of the world even further than it is today. In particular, it's been emphasized that hypersonic weapons, these super fast weapons that can travel at 5 times the speed of sound, what they do in terms of destabilization is shorten the reaction time of the targeted countries, during which leaders have a decision to make whether to respond in kind, respond at all, or receive this blow from these super fast weapons. The shortened response times just raises fear levels, destabilizes an otherwise scary situation, and increases distrust among the conflicting parties. Hans Christensen of the Federation of American Scientists made this point rather strenuously yesterday. Throughout the weekend, and on Monday in particular, during Austria's conference on humanitarian impacts of these weapons, we've heard about the catastrophic effects of the detonation of even a so-called low-yield nuclear weapon, effects that cannot be contained in time or space. And the fact that these indiscriminate effects helped bring about the establishment of the treaty. Over and over again, states representatives today reiterated their interest in expanding membership in the treaty because of the ongoing threatened use of these nuclear weapons, and in particular, because of the outbreak of war in Europe for the first time in many decades. Mr. Hans Christensen again pointed out that although Russia's been accused and condemned vociferously for its overt and covert threatened use of its nuclear weapons in the conflict in Ukraine, the NATO policy has never changed either, from a position of refusing to rule out first use of nuclear weapons. This is well known to Russia and to the other states in Europe, that NATO retains a first use policy with its nuclear weapons, which are in the possession of the UK, France, and then US weapons as well in Belgium, Italy, Netherlands, Germany, and perhaps still Turkey. So the optional so-called first use of these weapons is retained and promoted by both sides in this Ukraine, or all sides in this Ukraine conflict. And it could be disproportionately unfair to blame Putin's overt talk of it alone while ignoring the silent but very deadly similar threat being posed by NATO. We also heard from our dear friend Mary Olson about the disproportionate effect that the effects of nuclear weapons have on women and girls and infants as compared to men and boys. This treaty, the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, as was pointed out several times, is the very first overtly feminist international treaty in the world, in that it recognizes and emphasizes the disproportionate effect of radiation on women and girls as compared to its effect on men and boys. We know that birth abnormalities and reproductive disorders, stillbirths, and other complications of pregnancy are skyrocket after the dispersion of fallout from bomb tests. And now it's even been shown to have been the result of even the very first very low yield nuclear weapons test in the US desert, July 16, 1945. And Mary Olson was instrumental in seeing to it that this new treaty specifically directs attention to the unfair and disproportionate effect on women and girls that radiation exposure has shown to be. The mechanism by which women are harmed more than men has not yet been discovered. So she pointed out that much more research is needed in order to bring a light and attention to the fact that we're still spewing radiation into the environment by the operation of nuclear reactors and by the continued production of fuel for nuclear reactors and nuclear weapons. I believe my time has been used up, so I'd like to pass the baton.
That was wonderful. Thank you so much, John. Thank you. And I really appreciate, yeah, there's the quite comprehensive view that you gave us of a lot of the particulars of the last couple of days, especially personally from the Humanitarian Effects Conference. So thank you. Thank you so much for that. And I am now going to introduce our final speaker. Her name is Janene Yazzie. She is a community organizer and human rights advocate who has worked on development and energy issues with Indigenous communities across the United States for over 14 years. She served as co-convener of the Indigenous Peoples Major Group, IPMG, to the United Nations High-Level Political Forum on the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals from 2018 to 2021. She is the coordinator of the Nuclear Truth Protocol, the Nuclear Truth Project Protocols Working Group, and is Southwest Regional Director for NDN Collective. Thank you so much for being with us, Janene. Take it away.
You're muted, Janene.
But it looks like you're not able to unmute. Yeah, let's see if.
Thank you.
Ah, yes.
Oh, it's gone back.
Can you unmute us?
There we go.
Okay. All right.
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you so much,
Good.
Janene.
Okay. All right. Yeah, it's everyone. So sorry for my technical difficulties. I think I give out a lot of energy and then that messes with the technology. My name is Janene Yazzie. I'm from the Southwest United States, a member of the Diné Nation, also known as the Navajo Nation. And as was stated earlier, I'm attending this first meeting of state parties as a representative of the Nuclear Truth Project. You know, as my colleagues have already addressed, there's been a lot of excitement around the growing strength of the treaty. And over the last few days and in the upcoming sessions, a lot of the discussions are going to be centered around the need to develop strong practices and processes and frameworks to guide effective implementation of the treaty. And this is why, you know, particularly with the discussions that are happening right now around Articles 6 and 7, which is really about, you know, the assistance to affected communities and the environmental remediation, why it's so important to center the voices and the lived experiences and wisdom of affected communities and Indigenous peoples. And towards that end, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. It's been very clear the last couple of days, just the type of impact and the depth of knowledge that is brought when affected communities and Indigenous peoples participate in these negotiations. So much of what I've seen about the conversation has been centered around what happens when a bomb is detonated and the fears around the probability of future detonations. Can others mute themselves, please? I'm hearing feedback. Yeah, and the potential harm of like potential future, like, you know, nuclear war and nuclear bombs. And while, you know, it's so important for us to continue and uphold the voices of our relatives impacted by the A-bomb in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, as well as the hundreds of nuclear test sites around the world that have impacted millions of people, we need to work even harder to ensure that there's a growing critical understanding that the impacts and consequences of nuclear war do not start with the detonation of a bomb, nor does the mass murder that results from the nuclear weapons and in the aftermath of the impacts of a blast Nuclear war, as my people understand it, and as many other people understand it, begins with the mining of uranium and the devastation to the health of our peoples and our environment. And that devastation and that impact and that legacy continues as long as our waters are undrinkable and our soils are uncontaminated and our babies are being born with uranium in their bodies or with birth defects due to the exposure of pregnant women to radioactive contamination. The effects of nuclear war and nuclear related activities affect all of those millions living by or within areas of production or waste, or areas of the transportation routes of both nuclear weapons and of like the highly radioactive waste that results from nuclear activities. This is important because I've heard so many times by state delegates and even by representatives of NGOs that the potentiality of a future nuclear war could be the end of our way of life. And I appreciate the sense of urgency. I also appreciate the truth behind that. But I come from communities and work alongside others where it has already been the end of many ways of living, where the legacy of contamination and the impacts to our communities mean we can't drink the water available to us anymore. It means we can't gather the wild foods that grow the traditional foods that our communities have depended on for millennia. It means that it's dangerous to live in the places of our ancestors, the place where the land knows our names, because it makes our people and our loved ones and our children sick. And we do not have the technologies or the answers to fix those issues yet. If this isn't experiencing the end of our way of life, I don't know what is. I emphasize this because I've heard several times, especially in reference to, how do we understand and fully comprehend the health impacts and support, the victims. And I both hear and understand the need for more research because our communities definitely ask for more research. But one of the speakers, and I can't remember his name right now, but one of the speakers made a very important point. We don't need more research because all of the research so far that has been conducted have shown us how devastating this is, have shown us there is no way for us to justify continuing to participate either passively or actively in supporting a world in which nuclear weapons and nuclear related activities exist. And I stand by that full-heartedly. And I think it's important to note this because a lot of the discussions around interpreting the wording in the treaty about what does assistance mean has been centered around ensuring that there's definitely assistance for first and second generation victims. And this is part of the reason why it's important to be in these spaces, because I've been able to share important research done in the Southwest by the University of New Mexico with researchers like Dr. Johnny Lewis and the Southwest Research Information Center and other researchers that work in and around particularly my nation, the Navajo Nation, and their groundbreaking studies on the impacts of human health, particularly the Navajo birth cohort study, which proved that the exposure of pregnant women to radioactive contamination is transferable to the fetus through the uterus, and in some cases has led to the birth of babies with uranium in their bodies, the equivalent of adult uranium miners who got their exposure from their occupation. This means we have children being born in this world that if they developed a uterus in the womb, that means they carry all the eggs they will ever carry in their lifetime. And that means they are being born with uranium in their bodies before they ever get to childbearing age. And so that means in real time, that's 3 generations of exposure impacted with every pregnancy. And so even that small research, that small fact tells us that we don't need first and second generation victim assistance. We need long-term assistance for as long as this contamination exists in our environment. And we need the states to understand this obligation so that they can fully comprehend the seriousness of their liability and their responsibility to our communities. This information coupled with the stirring information presented by Mary Olson of the Gender and Radiation Impact Project, which, she was a presenter during yesterday's Humanitarian Impact Conference sponsored by the government of Austria, demonstrates the disproportionate and alarmingly unique impacts on women and children. This is why it's so important that our communities, our own researchers and community vetted allies are at the table when it comes to articulating the actual definition and response and implementing the TPNW. because there are serious gaps in the treaty, and the Nuclear Truth Project was formed for all of these reasons. We know there are serious questions and positions that need to be made about who are the victims and what kind of assistance is appropriate and meaningful, as well as what constitutes remediation. We also know that impacted communities' voices shouldn't be brought in alongside experts as some sort of augmented testimony to appeal to the emotionality and the hearts of those listening. But those voices should be recognized as experts in their own rights, because with the knowledge and the lived experience and all of the advocacy that has led to research expertise is what constitutes the qualifications necessary to ensure that the implementation of the TPNW does indeed lead to a nuclear-free world and justice for all those impacted from this obsession of certain nation states that created a tool for mass murder and all those under the guise of national security. I'm sharing with the parties and all those working to implement the TPNW, the protocols created by the Nuclear Truth Project. And as the coordinator of the working group tasked with the responsibility to develop these guidelines, we feel that the only way to meaningfully do this is when those undertaking this admirable and difficult task do so when they are in right relationship with those most impacted, so that there isn't this championing of quote unquote peacetime uses of nuclear production, such as nuclear power, and that people can fully understand what is at stake and what the cost is for all of these nuclear related activities. And so I'm at my time, but I'll share a link to the Nuclear Truth Project where you can see the protocols, with the caveat of understanding that we are still in the consultation processes to ensure that everyone that is affected can contribute to this, and that we are committed to doing the work to ensure that those who will be working on implementing the TPMW will adopt these protocols so that the collective efforts are meaningful and effective for our most vulnerable, centering the interests of all generations, including the unborn, for the sustainability, regeneration, and healing of our precious earth. Thank you.
Janene, thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here, really. And also, I just appreciate so much your emphasis on how, not just how important, but I think I would say it's essential, it's crucial that we have develop that critical understanding that the consequences of nuclear war, they don't start with the detonation of a bomb. And a bomb can never be detonated, and still we need to center, justice for all those impacted. So really, thank you so much. And I am so thankful that you are here with us. Yes, so we have the question and answer portion now, and we have quite a few questions from the chat, and so we're going to cover some of those combined, I think, to make sure we have time for all of them. I do want to make a note at this point, though, it is almost exactly at the hour. So that we have time for the questions, we're going to extend the program for 15 minutes. Of course, if you need to leave, that is absolutely fine, but just to let folks know that is where we're at. And I'm gonna get, let's see, all four of our speakers on the screen. If I could get some behind the scenes help with that, that would be great. Let's see. Oops. Janene and Benetick, actually, it looks like in order to put you on the screen, we have to have your videos on. So thank you so much. There's one. And Janene, if you're okay with it, if you are comfortable and able. Oh, awesome. There's yours. Thank you so much. Wonderful. So we have some questions that I want to get to. And the first one is quite straightforward, but so crucial, is just, are there any officials from the US present at Vienna, in Vienna? And I think we can probably all answer that, but I will put it out to the crowd.
Thank you. I'll stay unmuted because apparently I can't unmute myself. Not that I've seen, and I've been looking. Oh God. What I did find interesting is that there is an independent senator from Canada, from Manitoba, the Honorable Mary Lou McPhedran. And, you know, that got me thinking, and I'm so glad I saw in the chat that there are a group of elected leaders in the US that do support entering the treaty. And I hope they talk to us, you know, like these senators taking this independent initiative on their own can be very hard. And so needing to support and collaborate on these issues so that we can push on the inside is going to be very important. But I want to shout out to my Indigenous peoples as well, because we don't need to wait for the state representatives to do this. I mean, when has that ever been beneficial to us, right? When has that ever led to anything of change for us? As Indigenous sovereign nations, we ourselves can make our own commitments for a nuclear-free world. And that is something that I'm excited to return home with and to begin coordinating as well.
I'd like to say too that in 2014, the United States sent representatives surprisingly to the humanitarian impact conference that happened here in Vienna as well. And they proceeded to insult the gathering by making a political speech during introductory remarks that were specifically designed not to be a political statements. And this time, since that time, 2014, the treaty's been adopted, it's been entered into force, and so it's stigmatized and delegitimized nuclear weapons to such a degree that I believe the US would be embarrassed to show its face at this meeting here today, and probably shunned the meetings for that reason.
Yes, wow, thank you. Oh, and actually on that, we're going to make an announcement about this at the very end with more details and more resources. But tomorrow there is a press conference happening where US Congress people will be addressing the MSP tomorrow at 10:30. So yes, we'll send all of that out, no worries. But yes, so we have a question now for Benetick, actually. If I can pass it to you. It is about the Compact of Free Association and what could pressure the US to make a more fair compact for free association, in your view. Did it work? I asked. Yeah, there we go.
Okay.
I'll do that next time.
Yeah, for some reason I can't unmute myself. But yeah, in terms of the compact, right now, there is a lot of attention in the Pacific due to China. As I'm sure maybe some of you have heard, China is wanting to do deals in the South Pacific with places like Solomon Islands, and its closest, what do you want to call it, allies in the Pacific. And so this provides an opportunity for the Marshall Islands, given that there is this tension between the United States and China wanting influence in that region. And this has, of course, gotten the Biden administration's attention. Previously, the Biden administration told our government in the Marshalls that they did not want to address anything related to the nuclear legacy in the next Compact of Free Association. But the position of the Marshallese government is that if there is no nuclear legacy in these talks, then there is no Compact of Free Association. But we're hopeful that we can have a compact that's based on trust, accountability, and transparency, because we have yet to see these things.
Thank you so much, Benetick. And we have actually the next question is kind of for the whole group and possibly for Janene, if there's anything to add to what Janene has already shared. The question is, are there any present or proposed agreements in place or on the table to respond to the health needs of affected nuclear weapons damaged populations? And if anyone needs me to ask them to unmute, give me a break.
My colleagues can correct me if I'm wrong or add to this, but I believe as far as really getting to the detail of what that looks like, all that's being discussed is the need to create a process to better understand and fully assess what is happening, what those health impacts are, what are they projected to be, and what are the services necessary to respond to them. And we've heard very compelling testimony, particularly from survivors and from those from communities impacted by nuclear testing, kind of like the necessary need for wraparound services addressing everything from obviously birth exposures, but also diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and preventative health care for multiple generations of communities, because the contamination in our environment has a long legacy and therefore a long impact in our communities. But there's also been repeated need that we just don't know. We really don't know and don't understand the full breadth of how and why certain health impacts happen and occur, particularly the gender imbalance that is being brought out in studies that have been done, and that there is a need for more resources and more people dedicated to answering these questions. And so that's why I think there's been an emphasis on just trying to tease out what the process looks like to really assess that.
Yes, thank you. Does anyone else have something that they want to add to that? I see John and Marion. It looks like you're reaching to unmute. Is that true?
There have been several testimonials and presentations with regard to compensation to victims and survivors. In French Polynesia was subjected to French atmospheric testing, at least 17 bomb tests there, and representatives there talked about a limited compensation act or law that provides some compensation to some of the victims of it, but the same applies in the United States and in Kazakhstan, where it's very difficult to qualify for the compensation, to establish the fact that your illnesses are a result of the fallout of the water contamination from these tests. And so the world over, where nuclear tests have taken place, it's very difficult to qualify for the compensation bills that have been established. They need to be strengthened, and the numbers of victims need to be, definitions of a victim and a survivor need to be expanded, as Janene has pointed out.
Yes, wonderful. Thank you. And also at this point, actually, I want to mention that in the US, there is currently a push to expand RECA, which is the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act, which I think Mr. Gilbert had mentioned in the chat. And actually, I want to pass it over to Kelly from Nukwatch. If you do you have a word that you want to say about that in response?
Just that it was this about a month ago was passed. The extension of RECA was passed, but it was not expanded. And there's a 2-year time frame that the U.S. has to work on making sure that our representatives are supporting the expansion so that everyone who has been affected in the U.S. anyway is receiving compensation that they deserve. For example, the Trinity downwinders, the first downwinders of the first bomb test in the United States.
Yes, thank you, Kelly. And I see John and Marion's hand, collective hand. raised again.
Yeah, I still want to say something. What surprised me is that even the new studies which got presented at this conference, it's still not about internal radiation, which radioactive particles are much worse than just gamma ray radiation from the outside, what the normal studies are, the way it's being used. So it is actually much worse than it's been presented, which I don't like to add here, but it's important to know. Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much. So we are tight on time. There's actually one final question that I'd like to pose to everyone, because I think it's a really good way to sort of wrap up and have, if there's any last sort of one thing that you want to leave all of us with. But the question is, could anyone, or possibly everyone, speak to insights about moving different activist threads into more collaborative working strategies and methods? So out of the silos that we are often in now, and towards more collaboration.
Sure.
For a second.
It is a big question. I will say it's kind of, maybe it's actually counterintuitive to a sort of last, a last brief thought. But maybe it's actually something for all of us to leave thinking about. Before I close the question, or Janine, do you have something you want to say? Please go ahead.
I just felt like I spoke so much and I was trying to let my other colleagues share. There's been a lot of things stated here in different discussions about how important the role of civil society is right now at this juncture. And so the collaboration and
It's stuck.
Janine, we've lost you for a moment. Let's see though if it comes back.
Okay, maybe I can make a short announcement.
on our governments, particularly those in the US and Canada, those the states with the most nuclear power. And yeah, I think that's what we're doing, and time.
Janine, unfortunately, you've frozen on our end, although I think we heard about, oh, I think maybe she's lost connection. Okay, well, we'll see if she can connect back. If not, no worries. But yes, Marion.
Yeah, I just wanted to announce, maybe you heard about Ambassador Evelyn White from Costa Rica. She led all the UN negotiations on the TPNW treaty. And IPB, International Peace Bureau, is giving her a prize for it on the 4th of August in New York, just before the NPT starts. So everybody who is in New York and during that time might like to join or have this in mind. Yeah, she's a wonderful person.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much. Unless John and Benetick, if either of you has one last thing you really want to share, and it looks like maybe we're all. Oh, John, I see you reaching, and then we'll close out this portion.
I'll just share one thing that was nice to hear from the mayor of Nagasaki, who spoke today. He said, "We're engaged in the pursuit of the day when the world becomes one continuous, unbroken nuclear-free zone." It's a nice thought.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you all, even though, Janine is not able to be here right now. Thank you all so much for sharing your time with us. And I'm gonna remove these spotlights because we have, before we all leave, I have two very quick and very important announcements I want to make. We will also email these out and all of the information in them. So if it goes in one ear and out the other, not a problem. But I do think, at least for me personally, I always think this is great. And then what can I do now? And so we have two things that you can do right now, two actions that you can take that are really specific to our US context. The first is part of the Nuclear Ban Treaty Collaborative's current media push, with the purpose of getting the TPNW on the US media's radar and to show them that this is what people want to hear. Because coverage about nuclear weapons, about the threat of nuclear weapons, how to mitigate that, is just not accurate or comprehensive if the TPNW is left out. So I think this will be put in our chat as well, but I'm just going to show you what the screen looks like, where you can see what I'm talking about. So our ask right now, the action that you can take is to write a letter as part of this campaign. The campaign is focused on coordinating all of its media efforts on three of the top media outlets in the US, which is the New York Times, the national NPR, and CNN. And our goal is really just to get, as many voices concentrated on these three outlets as possible, and get as many, to sort of get a call to cover the TPNW, and now to cover, the first meeting of states parties that's just too loud to ignore. And so Sophia has kindly put this in the chat, and if you go to this page, I won't go through it now, but you'll get everything. I mean, every step that you need to send these out really easily. They're very quick, they're very short, and they're very simple. But it's really a numbers game. And so if you go to this page, each of these documents shows you step by step how to submit to the New York Times, to CNN, to NPR. And then there are even talking points down below as well if you feel lost for words. And then the directions also will direct you to log your letter here so that we can keep track of how many have been sent. Around, the last I checked, we were around 200. But yes, I think the message now is really that the first meeting of states parties is happening. You could even say something about, I listened to this report on the first MSP. What I'm hearing is that the US is really not there. We're not hearing your coverage. So I urge you to cover it, essentially, and that the American people really deserve, I think, to know that, while we're constantly hearing about the threat of nuclear weapons, that there is this widely supported, huge international effort that's addressing this threat. So yes, that is the first action you can take, is to write to those. Yes, as Rolf put in the chat, many people have written to all three. And the second, which actually, I'm so sorry, I should have had this up. Here it is. The second announcement that I want to make, that's something you can do. This is something I alluded to earlier, but tomorrow, Nuclear Ban US is holding a press conference tomorrow, June 22nd at 10:30 a.m. at the Capitol in Washington, D.C., where 6 of the US Congress people who are publicly asking the US to join the TPNW will be speaking. And it's going to be live streamed on Twitter and Facebook. So I'll put those links in the chat in a moment. And the full recording and the video of highlights will be available as well on nuclearban.us, where you can also click join to stay updated on their actions. But I want to just show you this graphic. So that press conference is happening tomorrow. Another action that we can take, if we're in the US, is to call our reps, to call our congressional reps, let them know that it's happening, urge them to join. So yes, those are two actions that we can take from right now. Like I said, we'll be sending all of this out in an email. But I just really want to wrap up by thanking every single one of you for both your time and your energy for joining us today. Those are two precious resources. And I think Janene, I don't know if you're still on, but I think Janene summed it up really when she said that we don't have to wait. We don't have to wait for our representatives. We don't have to wait for our government, right? Because although it remains fiercely protective of its nuclear weapons, there's so much that we can do right now, and we can decide to align ourselves with the treaty. And in that way, each of our actions is so important. I mean, if every one of us thought, I don't have to do anything because the next person will, then the impact that we can have is so much less than it could be. So every one of our actions is just so crucial. So yes, thank you for being here, and we're doing it, and let's get out there and support the treaty, and yeah, really get the US on board. So yes, that concludes our event for today. Thank you so much for staying behind. And I am gonna now pass it to Amy, who is gonna play a music video as an outro for us. Thank you, Amy.
Yeah.
Thank you, Emma.
Treaty says no bombs, you can't make them, own them, buy them, sell them, take them. You can't test them, threaten with them, move them. If you got the weapons, you better just lose them. The nuclear ban is coming for you. Treaty bans, manufacture, stockpile, acquisition, production, deployment, no matter what the mission. Futures on the phone, got something to say. Lose the nuclear weapons, get them out of the way. Someone get the children, the papas and the moms. Got a little news about the big bad nuke bombs. You forgot about them, think they went away. No way, still here, kill us all in a day. 1,500 across the states, building new nukes in a new arms race. Hey, Uncle Sam, we got news for you. The world got a nuke ban and voted and treaty says no bombs. The preacher man made them, own them, buy them, sell them, take them. Can't test them, threaten with them, move them. If you got the weapons, you better just lose them. The nuclear ban is coming for you. Treaty bans, manufacture, stockpile, acquisition, production, deployment, no matter what the mission. Futures on the phone, got something to say. Lose the nuclear weapons, get them out of the way. Someone get the children, the papas and the moms. Got a little news about the big bad nuke bombs. You forgot about them, think they went away. No way, still here, kill us all in a day. 1,500 across the states, building new nukes in a new arms race. Hey, Uncle Sam, we got news for you. The world got a nuke ban and voted it through. Don't need a preacher man to know the right thing to do. Necessary evil, the politicians say. Well, the old men hair all gone or gray. Total annihilation, just the price you pay. We want a future, so get the hell out of the way. The nuclear ban is coming for you. Missile silos, Midwest, wanna test, not best. All the rest, bombs and jets, what a mess. Payload of catastrophe, flying over you and me. Apocalypse, insanity, that ain't how it ought to be. Oh, India's got them, so does Pakistan, Russia, China, Britain, France, and Uncle Sam. Nuclear Korea, not to mention Israel. Dirty little secret, hush, hush, don't tell. Nuclear ban is coming for you. 9 nations think it's swell to send the world straight to hell. Other countries don't agree with wiping out humanity. Turn to smoke and ashes, everything we can see. ICANN says this isn't how it has to be.